I've been trying to get more organized in the shop, and you can see it's going quite well. The most important area to keep cleared is my workspace. Not to do whatever that was, but mostly just so I can move around. My biggest annoyance right now is this caca stool that is always in my way when I need to move, hiding when I need to sit, and tangled up when I need to use my tools. This ends today. So I took to the worldwide YouTube when I came across this and thought, oh, I need this. So I continued my search for swinging stool designs. It seemed like every creator had their own flavor. Jimbo's Garage had his emblem and diamond plate. April Wilkerson made a huge speed square. Brandon Lund did these varying size holes. And even Pask Makes made a sleek industrial style looking stool. So what's my flavor gonna be? I figured it out. I was inspired by the bottom of my shoe. Honeycomb. This is gonna be awesome. I had to do it. I'm a dad. Let's get to the good stuff. I have some scrap metal that'll work perfect for this project. 1/4 inch thick plate, 1.5 by 2 inch rectangular tube, and 1.5 inch flat bar. I have these weld-on bullet hinges that you would typically use for hanging gates, but they'll work perfect for this project. Not to mention, they're gonna allow me to take the seat off when I need to. I cut the scrap down using my Harbor Freight porter band and an angle grinder with a skinny disc. To make the honeycomb pattern, I'm gonna use 1 inch wide strips cut out of that 1/4 inch plate. The skinny disc left a rough edge, so I had to do a little bit of cleanup work with my die grinder. To avoid a cattywampus mess of a pattern, I did go ahead and draw this up on the computer to create a form, which is the key to creating a consistent pattern. In order for each piece to fit perfectly around this form, I had to cut the 1 inch flat bar down to 1.89 inches long. In order for each piece of the flat bar to fit around the shape of the form, I had to put a 30-degree angle on each of the edges. Now, the easiest way to get this angle was to use this setup magnet on the 30-degree faces and slide it back and forth on my benchtop sander. About halfway through, I figured out that if I hit those edges with a flap disc and get a close shape, I could finish it off with the benchtop sander, and it was a lot quicker. Now, once I got all those pieces shaped, I had to use 3 different sizes of clamps to get it onto the form. This really wasn't the best way to make this pattern, but it worked. After a couple of hours of fighting with the clamps, I figured out I could use the same setup magnet to finish out the pattern, which made things a lot quicker. Although the honeycomb pattern looks freaking cool, like awesome, it did make the project take about 3 times longer. So I hope it's worth it. I'm gonna go get some coffee. I got the honeycomb about 80% of the way complete and needed the stool frame to finish out the weldment. I welded the 1.5 inch flat bar to the rectangular tube using 1/8 inch 7018 rod and my cheap Harbor Freight welder. I made sure to lay enough weld material down to be able to come back and grind everything down with an angle grinder to where it was smooth. I then finished the honeycomb pattern by tacking the remaining pieces to the frame. I had this small Acme thread laying around for a project. Can't remember what it was for. It had a nut and a sleeve attached to it and would work perfect for this project. I first welded the sleeve to the nut and I used the thread itself to keep everything straight. I then welded the sleeve nut to the end of the frame. I finished that one off by grinding the welds down to a smooth finish. Although the honeycomb pattern was very time consuming, I think the hardest part of this project was actually welding on the bullet hinges. The stool designs I saw on YouTube actually used a rod that went the full length of the stool itself, and so everything was lined up perfectly. Well, for my project, I'm using these bullet hinges, and in order to get the stool to swing and not bind up, I had to make sure these 2 bullet hinges were axially aligned and perfectly parallel. I drew a straight line both on my table and on the stool itself to try to get those hinges to line up. Now, while welding these out, I was very careful to perform small tacks so I didn't put too much heat on one side or the other. I made sure to allow enough time in between the tacks for it to cool, and then I would move to the opposite side to continue tacking. Even after taking all this care, the top hinge got a little out of parallel to the naked eye. But luckily, it still swung. Swinged. Swanged. Swinged. Still swinged. The only issue this caused was I had to swing it to a specific position in order to lift the bullet hinges off. I can work with that. I'm using the top of my old crappy stool because it was a good size and the edges were rounded nice. I found the base plate I'm using at the scrapyard and it was already cut to the perfect diameter. So I did my best to try to find the center of the circle. I used a square to draw a box with the corners touching the very edge of the circle, and then I pulled the diagonals to try to figure out where the center point was. Now, after I marked where I thought the center point was, I drilled out a hole. Then I used a bolt and a thrust bearing on top of my DIY vise. You can go watch the build here to spin the base plate around that center point that I found. You can see my attempt at finding the circle was a complete fail. So I went ahead and used a metallic Sharpie to draw a perfect circle that I'm going to use to position this on that crappy old stool top. So I went ahead and drilled 8 holes into it for the screws. Using the hole at the center of the plate to put a plug weld on the end of the screw actually eliminates most of the effects of weld distortion, and so you get a really square fit up for the plate to the screw. After I did that, I questioned if that weld really would hold the weight of me being off center on that stool, so I went ahead and put a fillet weld all the way around, assuming that it wouldn't pull the edges down too far. There was just one problem. I welded the plate upside down. Idiot! So the chamfer for the screws to be flush underneath the seat were on the wrong side. Stupid! Luckily, the plate was thick enough that all I had to do was flip it over, re-chamfered the bottom side of the hole. Here we go. Let's test it out. Oh, I'm excited for this one. So the swinging action of the chair was actually super satisfying. The seat twisted around that screw at the same time that you swung around the table, and I was happy. That was until I swung all the way out and we ran into another problem. When I swing all the way away from the table, the moment or the torque created from my body weight on the table actually caused it to tip. That ain't gonna work. So I thought through the situation and figured out 2 things that are gonna help keep that table down. First thing is my table's currently on the wheels and I have screw down feet. What this is going to do is effectively widen the footprint of my table, making it require more torque to get the table to tip over. Additionally, to get it a little bit more stable, I had to just put this 50-pound dumbbell on the other side. Not ideal, but it worked. Super practical. I mean, yeah, it's not like I need to work on the table or anything. Stupid. I guess you're just going to have to wait for the next video where I show you how I fix the table tipping. I'm super happy with how this swing out stool turned out. It's awesome. Invaluable for me to sit at the table and perform my work and not clutter the area. The honeycomb was a boss decision. I think it really made the whole thing specific to me, and I know ain't nobody in the world is going to have a stool just like this one. That's what I love about DIY. Now, if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and click here to watch me build the welding table that this chair gets mounted to. Doing, doing, doing.